What if I told you there is a crop that never asks to be replanted? You put it in the ground once, it feeds you this year, it feeds you next year, it feeds you 10 years from now. For 10,000 years, civilizations built their food systems around this idea. One planting, decades of harvest, no seed purchases, no annual labor, no dependence on anyone. Then modern agriculture decided that was a problem. A crop that sustains itself cannot be sold every season. So it was pushed aside in favor of crops that demand constant buying. This is the plant we were taught to forget. Every spring, the ritual begins. Farmers buy seeds, they prepare beds, they plant rows, they wait, they harvest. Then the field goes empty. The next year, they do it all over again. This is the heartbeat of modern agriculture, an endless cycle of starting from zero. Seed companies profit. Input suppliers profit. The farmer works harder just to stay in place. But what if that cycle was never necessary? There is a crop that breaks the pattern entirely. You plant it once, it produces food. You harvest what you need. The plant stays alive. It keeps growing. It keeps yielding. Year after year, the same patch feeds you without a single new seed. No tilling, no replanting, no annual purchases. Some fields have produced continuously for decades, some for centuries. This is not a miracle. This is how food worked before we were taught to forget it. Perennial and semi-perennial crops once formed the backbone of human survival. They required no supply chains, no dependency, no annual gamble against weather and markets. They simply grew. The question is not why these crops exist. The real question is why we abandoned them, and the answer has nothing to do with feeding people. The plant is called Taro. Its scientific name is Colocasia esculenta. It has been cultivated for at least 10,000 years, making it one of the oldest crops on Earth. Genetic studies trace its origins to Southeast Asia, somewhere between present-day Malaysia and Indonesia. From there, it traveled with human hands across oceans. Polynesian voyagers carried taro in their canoes as they colonized the Pacific. It reached Hawaii, Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga. It spread westward into India and Africa. It moved through the Caribbean. Everywhere it landed, it became more than food. It became foundation. In Hawaii, taro was not simply eaten. It was considered an ancestor. The Kumulipo, the Hawaiian creation chant, describes taro as the elder sibling of humanity, born from the same divine parents. To cultivate taro was to honor that relationship. Entire societies organized themselves around its care. Today, more than 400 million people rely on taro as a staple food. In parts of Oceania and West Africa, it provides up to 30% of daily calories. It is not exotic, it is not obscure. It is one of the most important crops most people have never heard of. The reason for that silence is no accident. Taro grows from a corm, an underground storage organ similar to a bulb. When planted, the corm sends up broad heart-shaped leaves and develops roots that anchor deep into the soil. But the magic happens below the surface. As the plant matures, it produces smaller corms called cormels around its base. These offshoots grow attached to the mother plant, forming a cluster of edible material underground. When harvest time comes, farmers do not pull the entire plant. They remove the mature corm and select cormels while leaving younger growth in place. The remaining material continues developing and new cormels form. The cycle repeats. One planting becomes 2 harvests, then 5, then 10, then 20. Families in the Pacific have tended the same taro patches for generations without ever starting over. This is not passive. It requires knowledge. Farmers must understand when to harvest, which cormels to leave, and how to maintain water flow in wetland paddies. But the labor is maintenance, not reconstruction. The field never goes empty. The soil never lies bare. The system regenerates itself as long as the knowledge survives. That knowledge was passed down for millennia. But what happens when the system is treated as primitive? A traditional taro field does not follow the logic of industrial farming. There is no single planting date. There is no single harvest day. The field exists in constant motion, with plants at every stage of growth living side by side. In Hawaiian Loi, the flooded taro paddies cultivated for over 1,000 years, farmers move through fields regularly. They harvest mature corms, replant cormels, and manage water levels in continuous rotation. The field is never cleared. It is never left fallow. It produces food every month of the year. The leaves are also edible. Young taro leaves, when properly cooked, provide protein and vitamins. In many cultures, leaves are harvested alongside corms, adding another layer of yield from the same planting. One patch of ground feeds people in multiple ways without being torn up and started over. This is not farming as extraction. This is farming as relationship. The plant gives. The farmer tends. The cycle continues. Modern agriculture would call this inefficient. It cannot be scaled. It cannot be mechanized. It cannot be owned by distant corporations. But for the people who practice it, efficiency was never the point. Survival was. And taro delivered for 10,000 years. Taro is not a fragile crop. It was built for environments that would destroy most staples. In wet cultivation, taro grows submerged in flooded paddies. Standing water suppresses weeds and pests naturally. No herbicides required. The roots tolerate waterlogged soil that would rot potatoes or corn in days. In parts of Southeast Asia and the Pacific, taro paddies double as aquaculture systems. Farmers raise fish among the plants. The fish eat insects. Their waste fertilizes the taro. One field produces 2 foods with no external inputs. In dry cultivation, upland taro varieties grow without irrigation. They tolerate poor soils, shade, and irregular rainfall. Farmers in Africa and the Caribbean grow taro in forest clearings, on hillsides, in marginal land that would never support rice or wheat. The plant adapts. Nutritionally, taro delivers. 100 grams of corm provides around 112 calories, primarily from complex carbohydrates. It contains potassium, magnesium, and fiber. The leaves offer more. They carry protein, vitamin C, and iron. A single crop that feeds through its root and its leaf. This adaptability made taro invaluable. It could be planted anywhere. It could survive anything. But adaptability alone could not protect it from what came next. Taro does not reproduce by seed in most traditional systems. Farmers propagate it vegetatively. They take a corm or cormel, plant it, and wait for it to grow. Then they harvest and replant from that same stock. The process repeats indefinitely. No one needs to buy anything. This is food sovereignty in its purest form. A family that establishes a taro patch owns their food supply. They do not depend on seed companies. They do not rely on annual shipments. They do not need cash to survive the next season. The crop perpetuates itself through the hands of the people who grow it. In traditional Pacific Island societies, taro was wealth. It was traded, gifted, and inherited. A healthy taro patch represented security that money could not match. When storms came, when droughts lingered, when supply chains collapsed, the taro remained. Communities with strong taro traditions could weather disasters that would starve populations dependent on imported grain. This autonomy was precisely what made taro dangerous to systems built on dependency. A crop that feeds without external inputs generates no recurring revenue. It resists centralization. It empowers local control, and that became a problem when new powers arrived with different priorities. The shift began with machines. As agriculture industrialized, fields were redesigned for tractors, harvesters, and uniform planting schedules. The goal was speed. The metric was yield per labor hour, and Taro fit none of it. Taro fields resist mechanization. The plants mature at different times. The corms grow at irregular depths and shapes. Harvesting requires human judgment, knowing which corms are ready and which should remain. Machines cannot make that decision. They can only clear. Annual crops offered simplicity. Plant the entire field at once, harvest the entire field at once, plow it under, start again. This cycle matched the rhythm of industrial capitalism. It required inputs: seeds, fertilizer, pesticides. Inputs meant sales. Sales meant profit. Taro generated no annual purchases. A farmer who planted it once might never buy propagation material again. The machine economy had no use for permanence. It rewarded repetition. Development programs pushed rice, maize, and wheat. These were global commodities. They could be stored, shipped, and traded on international markets. Taro could not compete. It spoiled quickly. It did not standardize. It stayed local. Within a generation, the crop that had sustained thousands of years of civilization was pushed aside for crops that required buying again and again. Colonial agriculture accelerated the erasure. When European powers claimed territories across the Pacific, Africa, and the Caribbean, they brought their own ideas about what land should produce. Sugar, coffee, rubber, cotton, crops for export, crops that generated cash for distant markets. Indigenous food systems were dismissed as backward. Taro paddies were drained for plantation agriculture. Forest gardens were cleared. Labor was redirected from subsistence to commodity production. People who once fed themselves were forced into cash economies, where they bought food instead of growing it. In Hawaii, the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom in 1893 began a century of land transformation. Sugar plantations diverted water from Lo'i. Taro acreage collapsed from an estimated 6,000 acres in the mid-1800s to under 400 by the 1980s. The crop survived in home gardens and cultural preserves, not in the agricultural economy. The knowledge survived too, but in fragments. Elders remembered. Families maintained small patches. But without land, without water rights, without institutional support, Taro could not compete with imported rice that cost less at the store than growing food yourself. Dependency replaced sovereignty. The conditions that marginalized Taro are beginning to reverse. Industrial agriculture faces mounting pressures. Seed costs rise every year. Fertilizer prices spike with energy markets. Climate instability makes annual planting increasingly risky. One bad season can wipe out a farm dependent on a single harvest window. Perennial and semi-perennial crops offer a different model. They reduce exposure. They require fewer inputs. They keep living roots in the ground, which prevents erosion and builds soil over time. Researchers are now studying traditional taro systems for exactly these reasons. In Hawaii, young farmers are restoring Lo'i. Organizations like the Waipa Foundation train new generations in wetland cultivation. Similar movements are growing in Fiji, Samoa, and Papua New Guinea. The goal is not nostalgia, it is resilience. Taro also offers nutritional advantages. Its low glycemic index makes it suitable for diabetic diets. Its leaves provide protein in regions where meat is scarce. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has identified taro as a priority crop for climate adaptation in tropical regions. What was pushed aside is being pulled back. Not because the past was perfect, but because the present is failing. Taro does not fit the assumptions we were taught to accept. Modern agriculture insists that food must be replanted every year, that farmers must buy inputs every season, that dependency is simply how the system works. Taro refuses. A single planting that feeds families for decades. A field that never empties. A crop that spreads through community hands, not corporate supply chains. This is not primitive. This is not inefficient. This is a model of abundance that industrial systems cannot replicate because they were never designed for permanence. They were designed for repetition, for profit, for control. The erasure of perennial food systems was not about feeding people. It was about creating customers. A farmer who never needs to buy seed is a farmer who cannot be sold to, but the knowledge survived. It survived in Loi, kept alive by stubborn families. In Pacific gardens where taro still anchors the meal. In African villages where corms are passed down like inheritance. The crop waits. Climate change is making the wait shorter. Rising costs are making the lesson louder. A food system built on annual dependency is fragile. A food system built on living permanence is not. Taro has been ready for 10,000 years. The only question is whether we remember how to plant it.